Hey, welcome to the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute with your host, the alchemist of Indiana's Black Forest, Alan Bishop. Hey, this channel is all about home distilling and legal distilling. If you've got questions, reach out to us in the comments below, social media, or via bishopshomegrown@gmail.com. And don't forget to check out thealchemistcabinet.com. What's up, guys? Back again with another marathon session of almost did the if you have ghosts you have everything bullshit again. The One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute. As you can tell, I'm still recovering from cataract surgery. This eye is still just a tad little bit swollen, but it'll be all right. Much better than I was last week. Last week I was basically useless, but basically coming in answering your questions as we always do. I'm always looking for new questions, guys, so please reach out to me, bishopshomegrown@gmail.com, and or the YouTube comments below or social media, and I'll try to get back to you. If I miss your question, message me again, right? It just is what it is. Or if you have something that's a very detailed question and you need some actual consultation time, we do offer consultations at thealchemistcabinet.com for a fair price on the phone, and I really enjoy doing those. I've met some really great people that way. So today I can actually read, whereas the last time I did videos when I just had the one eye done, it was a little difficult to read anything that was sent into the channel. So from Brandon Lewis: Alan, thank you for sharing your knowledge so freely. I've had a long-standing question about finished spirits, particularly whiskey, that I can't seem to get a reliable answer on. Like many others, I am a fan of finished whiskeys and brandy, port, and sherry casks. What major differences occur in finishing these spirits in an empty used barrel like this versus just adding the finishing spirit and letting them marry and maybe oxidize a bit more? Further, is this something I can replicate easily at home with either purchase or homemade spirits? I know for certain it's more complex, but can't help but occasionally ask myself, how is this different than just mixing a cocktail or making an aged cocktail? Appreciate the consideration. Blue. This is a fantastic question as far as I'm concerned, because it's one that I think even a lot of distillers, they sort of skirt the color of the law, as it were, when it comes to that. So I've talked about on the channel before, what I consider a finishing barrel is a dry barrel. And when I say dry, what I mean is all I want in that barrel, whether it's a port barrel or a rum barrel or a honey barrel or whatever it is, all I want in that barrel is whatever liquid is seeped into the wood. I do not want a puddle of that liquid in that barrel when I add my bourbon or my rye to it in order to finish it. To me, that seems an awful lot like cheating, or as you're saying, adding, actual product to the barrel, changing it completely from what it initially was, or even potentially making a barrel-aged cocktail, as you point out. So for me, I always try to get completely empty barrels before I refill them. Every once in a while, there might be an exception. If there's for example, a beer barrel, like a stout beer barrel, there are times that I don't mind to have some of that stout lees in there, depending on what I'm trying to do with that particular product. But I kind of like the idea of that lees being in there and really heavying up that particular whiskey that I might be finishing in that particular barrel. Otherwise, again, empty barrel, curacao barrel, port barrel, sherry barrel, whatever it is, I want it as empty as possible. And the reason for that is because I want to maintain the integrity of the whiskey that is going into the barrel and just have some influence from what was previously in that barrel, right? In other words, when you taste a port barrel finished whiskey that I might have done, I don't want you tasting just straight up port. I don't want you to have those real big, heavy port notes, those fruit notes coming from the port. If there's fruit notes there, I want there to be fruit notes in that whiskey, and I want that port barrel to accentuate those notes, not create those notes, as it were, because to me it seems like cheating. Again, I could have just put whiskey into a barrel and poured port into it. It's not the same thing. Now, are there products like that out there? Yes, there are. And to your question more so, letting those products marry with a whiskey and or even oxidize and mature with a whiskey, there is nothing wrong with that. There was a great product out there a few years ago. I don't know if it's still out there because I haven't seen it for a while, but it was called Alberta Rye Dark Batch. And it was basically a percentage of Canadian whiskey, a percentage of Old Grandad mash bill whiskey, bourbon, and then a percentage of wine. And I can't remember the exact percentage of wine, but it was a couple percentage points worth of wine. I love that stuff, but it did not like me back. And I'm not going to lie, I probably missed work a couple times from drinking on that stuff, but it was really good. Now, do I think there's room for spirits like that? I certainly think that there is room for stuff like that. There's a long tradition of that in certain distillation traditions, such as Pinot de Charentas, which isn't really wine additive. It's actually fresh pressed grape juice that you're adding a little bit of grape brandy to fortify like a wine. They do something similar to that with Calvados. It's called Pommeau, which is an apple juice that's fortified with apple brandy to make the actual alcohol in the product. I don't see anything wrong with that as long as there's transparency on the labeling, but I do think it's important for the consumer and the distiller to understand that there is a very distinct difference in having a finishing barrel that is actually dry and you're just pulling the product that's left over in the wood into the whiskey or the brandy that you're finishing, and having a barrel that you get in that has 2 or 3 gallons of liquid still left in it that you're then putting whiskey into. Then you are blending. There's no argument to be made otherwise. Logistically, you can't argue it otherwise. You would never convince me one way, shape, form that you weren't blending because, oh, well, you know, we take the barrels as we get them. They had 4 or 5 gallons of Curacao or 4 or 5 gallons of port or 4 or 5 gallons of Madeira or whatever. And you're blending, and you know you're blending. You are skirting the law. That's the way it is, right? And nobody would have any problem with what you're doing as long as you were honest about it. That's my opinion there. So I think that answers that question. We'll move on to another one here. So a related question, maybe to some degree. So let's see. From Michael. Love your show. Wish I could buy your specialty grains and have them shipped to New Zealand, where hobbyists can legally distill. I make upscale moonshine, relying on dextrose and 8 to 9 pounds of grains to flavor 5 gallons of wash to double distilled bourbon and whiskey. I'm pretty happy with the results. When experimenting with rum, I learned from Stillage and Stillworks in brewing that dark rum contains stillage to flavor the final product. I've experimented with my Faints run, adding 5% of stillage and making a dark whiskey with good results. The only issue is there is precipitate that can't be filtered out. You have to decant. I think there's an interesting richness of flavor. Have you tried this? P.S. He sends the proper way to pronounce exogenous enzymes, and I did listen to it, but I'm going to continue to say it my Hoosier way because I will forget the proper way to say it a million times over. So just the way I am. I have not played around with that experimentation whatsoever. As I said, you know, there's some parallels to that with Pinot de Charentes and Pommeau and things of that nature. I think it could be kind of interesting. I don't see why you couldn't do it. I would see probably, honestly, I think where that would really have some great effect would be in the example of like beer schnapps, right? Distilling beer and pulling off those flavors of the beer and then actually adding some of that beer back to it potentially to the finished spirits to hold on to some more of the initial flavor of the raw material, the raw substrate that you started with, right? I think that could be really, really interesting to play with. But I think there's other instances where it might be a possibility and be something fun to play with, especially if maybe, say, you take take some of the stillage and spice it a little bit, you know, and add that back in to add an entirely different complexity and a different kind of mouthfeel to it. That could be really cool, I think. I don't necessarily see anything wrong with it. I think that there's always room for adding new styles and new takes on things, and it could be cool to do it with a whiskey, and I highly encourage you to try it. I love getting emails from different places in the world, by the way, whether it be New Zealand or, you know, we've even had some from Ukraine, etc. But I love getting emails from all over the world like that. That's super cool, guys. And I learn a lot from you guys too. So keep it up. And as always, keep up with the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute. Subscribe, give us a rating. I don't even know if there's ratings on YouTube. I'm so confused by the past 2 weeks after cataract surgery that I don't know whether I'm on YouTube or I'm on, you know, doing my podcast or whatever. Anyway, subscribe to the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute. Leave a comment below. Send us a question. Check out thealchemistcabinet.com. The brand new book, The Alchemist Cabinet Volume 2. The Black Forest Method is up. If the website shows that it is out, let us know. We are ordering more books. When those books come in, it takes 2 weeks for them or so to get to us. Then we sign them and we send them out to you. All right, guys. Love y'all. Later.